The Galactic Council had gathered in their towering chambers, a place of shining metals and softly glowing energy panels. Representatives from hundreds of star systems had come, each one wearing their species' unique symbols of rank and authority. Some floated in zero-gravity pods, while others moved on multiple legs or hovered on energy fields. It was a scene of disciplined elegance, yet tension hung thick in the air. Today they were not debating trade routes or planetary disputes. Today they were judging humanity. Humanity had always been unusual to the Council. They were young compared to most spacefaring civilizations. Yet they were bold in ways that made the older races uneasy. Reports had reached the Council for decades, humans negotiating in ways that defied standard protocols, exploring systems thought impossible, surviving situations that should have destroyed them. And worse, they never seemed to be afraid. The discussion began formally with the Council's head speaker, a being with translucent skin and eyes like molten gold, presenting the evidence. Humans have ignored our warnings, interfered in our borders, and engaged in actions that jeopardize the balance of interstellar peace, the speaker said. Their voice echoed in the vast chamber, a sound both alien and commanding. They act with unpredictability, and their behavior cannot be monitored or controlled. The Council must act. Images and recordings were displayed mid-air, showing humans maneuvering ships through asteroid fields no other species could navigate. Other clips revealed human colonies surviving on harsh planets, where no alien race had ever lasted more than a few generations. The footage sparked murmurs among the Council. Some of them watched in disbelief, others in unease. It was not simply that humans were strong. They seemed untethered, unbound by the rules that governed the rest of the galaxy. As the evidence ended, debates began. Many argued for restraint. Exile is too harsh, one counselor said, a multi-eyed creature whose voice rippled like water. They are resourceful, yes, but perhaps they can be guided. If we push them into the unknown, who can predict the consequences? But others were less cautious. They are a danger to us all, another replied, their form shifting constantly, reflecting the emotions of the speaker. Their unpredictability will only grow. It is not just a question of control. It is a question of survival for our own systems. They cannot remain among us. The argument stretched for hours as different species voiced their opinions. Each speech was laden with political nuance and subtle threats. Humans, the topic of discussion, were not present, of course. They had not requested to be there. Humanity's representative to the Council had been refused entry years ago. The Council had judged humanity from afar, relying on reports, observations, and occasionally intercepted messages. Finally, after much debate, a decision was made. The Council would exile humanity, banishing them from all recognized space. The decree was simple in its wording, but devastating in its meaning. Humans were to leave the borders of known space and settle beyond the edge of charted star systems. The area they were sent to was called the Abyss, a sector so dark and dangerous that most civilizations avoided it entirely. The name alone sent shivers through the counselors' minds. It was a place of collapsing stars, wandering black holes, and planets stripped bare by radiation storms. No one had ever thrived there. When the decree was announced, a wave of relief passed through some of the counselors. For them, humanity was finally out of their control. For others, a seed of doubt had been planted. What could a species so resilient, so audacious do when left alone in the darkest reaches of space? Humanity, on the other hand, received the news quietly. The Council's message arrived via encrypted communication, as it always did. Leaders gathered aboard the largest human fleet, a collection of military ships and civilian transports carrying millions of people. In a war room lined with screens and holomaps, they watched the message unfold. There was no panic, no cries of despair. Instead, a calm understanding settled over the room. One of the commanders spoke quietly. "They've chosen exile. They think it will end us." He paused, letting the words sink in. "They don't know us." That night, the fleet's lights dimmed to conserve energy as the ships prepared to leave known space. Families gathered in common areas, looking at the stars that would soon fade from view. Children asked questions not in fear but in curiosity. They had grown up hearing stories about the Galactic Council, about the civilizations that had ruled space for centuries. Yet they had also grown up hearing stories about human resilience, about survival against impossible odds. Elders told tales of humanity's past struggles on Earth, plagues, wars, natural disasters. They spoke of how humans had adapted, rebuilt, and thrived when everything seemed lost. The stories were not meant to scare, but to remind everyone that being pushed to the edge was where humans excelled. As the fleet moved closer to the abyss, the first signs of the unknown began to appear. Sensors detected faint gravitational anomalies, regions where light bent unpredictably. Ships experienced minor system malfunctions, strange readings, and brief communication blackouts. Yet humans approached each obstacle with curiosity rather than fear. Engineers analyzed the distortions, studying the patterns and preparing their ships to adapt. Pilots adjusted their courses with precision, learning to anticipate the unusual gravitational shifts. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The journey through the uncharted sectors was grueling. Supplies had to be rationed carefully, and the silence of space pressed heavily on everyone. There were moments of despair, of doubt. People wondered if the Council had made a mistake in thinking humanity could survive here. But even in the darkest hours, something unique about humans kept hope alive. It was not luck. It was ingenuity, adaptability, and an unshakable belief that no challenge was insurmountable. Leaders held regular councils aboard the flagship, discussing strategies and contingencies. They debated how to find habitable zones, how to manage resources, and how to maintain the morale of millions traveling into a void with no guarantees. Each decision was made with a focus on survival and unity. Unlike the Galactic Council, which often prioritized politics and power, humanity's leaders focused on people, the crew, the families, the communities that depended on them. The journey was not without its dangers. Meteoroid storms forced ships to maneuver through deadly fields of debris. Some smaller transports were damaged, and repairs had to be carried out in harsh conditions. Radiation bursts from dying stars forced sections of the fleet to retreat temporarily. Yet every challenge was met with determination. Children learned lessons in adaptation from their parents. Engineers improvised repairs that seemed impossible. Soldiers and civilians alike discovered that courage did not always mean fighting. Sometimes it meant staying calm and finding a solution when everything seemed lost. During long periods of darkness, people told stories and sang songs, keeping culture alive even in the emptiness of the abyss. They shared memories of Earth, of oceans and forests, of cities that had once bustled with life. It was a reminder that even though they were leaving the known universe, humanity carried its spirit with them. Music, laughter, and art became tools of survival, not just entertainment. They reminded everyone that they were human, not just survivors. Weeks turned into months, months into years. And slowly, the first glimpses of the abyss began to appear. A dead star with planets orbiting erratically, a comet shower that stretched across light years, dark energy clouds that seemed to swallow everything in their path. It was terrifying yet mesmerizing. The fleet approached the abyss not as prisoners but as explorers, as a species unafraid of the unknown. And as the first human eyes looked upon the darkness of the abyss, a quiet determination settled over them. The Council had cast them out, had meant to break them, but humanity had never broken. In fact, the exile had ignited something deeper, a need not just to survive but to thrive where others feared to tread. They were leaving behind what was known, stepping into the infinite unknown, ready to make the abyss their home. The decision was silent but unanimous. Humanity would claim the abyss. They would bend its challenges to their will. They would live where no one thought life could exist. And in that decision, the first seeds of a new chapter were planted. A chapter that would test them in ways unimaginable, but also reveal the strength, creativity, and resilience that had defined humans from the very beginning. The Galactic Council had cast them out. Humanity had accepted the challenge, and the journey into the abyss had truly begun. The voyage into the abyss tested humanity in ways no one could have predicted. The first months had been filled with anxious anticipation, but now, the reality of traveling through uncharted, lifeless space began to weigh heavily on everyone aboard the fleet. The darkness around them was not like the night sky of Earth. There were no familiar constellations, no comforting glimmers of distant suns. Only a vast black emptiness stretched endlessly in every direction, broken occasionally by the dying light of a collapsed star or the strange shimmer of cosmic dust. At first, people had tried to maintain routines similar to life in known space. Children attended makeshift schools in common areas, learning not just mathematics or history, but lessons about survival and cooperation. Adults continued their work on ship maintenance, energy management, and communication systems, but slowly the silence of the void began to make itself felt. Even the most disciplined individuals found themselves unsettled by the vast emptiness surrounding them. The crew quickly realized that survival in the abyss would require more than discipline and routines. The void was unpredictable. Sensors sometimes failed, showing false readings of objects that were not there, or missing threats that could appear suddenly. Communications across the fleet occasionally went dark, leaving some ships cut off for hours or even days. In these moments, fear began to creep in. But rather than panic, humans turned to problem solving. Engineers and scientists studied the anomalies, attempting to understand the strange forces at play. They experimented with navigation techniques that had never been used before, mapping gravitational shifts and dark energy flows. Every failure became a lesson, every mistake an opportunity to improve. Despite the challenges, humanity's adaptability shone brightest during moments of crisis. A sudden burst of cosmic radiation swept across part of the fleet one week, disabling the energy shields of several ships. Alarms blared, and for a moment, panic threatened to take over. But engineers and crew members sprang into action. They worked in shifts, repairing the damaged systems while others rerouted power to critical life support functions. Children and civilians were safely moved to reinforced compartments, and even during the chaos there was a sense of unity. Every person understood their role in survival, and every person contributed. Food and water were always a concern. While the fleet carried vast stores, the journey through the abyss could last decades, perhaps longer. Scientists began experimenting with hydroponic systems, trying to grow plants using minimal light and energy. At first, the results were modest. Some plants grew slowly, while others failed entirely. Yet human ingenuity prevailed. They adapted the systems, using heat from the ship's reactors and recycled water to sustain the growth. Soon, small gardens appeared in the largest ships, giving the fleet not only a source of food but a sense of life in the otherwise lifeless void. The emotional health of the fleet became just as important as physical survival. Long stretches of silence and darkness began to weigh on people's minds. Isolation, even among thousands, could feel oppressive. To keep spirits alive, humans found creative ways to connect. They held storytelling nights where elders shared tales from Earth and from early space exploration. Songs and music echoed through the corridors, reminding everyone of who they were and where they had come from. Sports and games were adapted to the zero-gravity environment, giving children and adults alike a sense of play and normalcy. These activities were not trivial. They became essential tools for keeping hope alive. Even in the midst of the abyss, humans continued to learn and explore. Small scout ships were sent ahead to investigate gravitational anomalies, collapsed stars, and rogue planets. Each discovery brought excitement and wonder even when danger was involved. On one mission, a scout ship passed close to a black hole, using its gravitational pull to slingshot further into the abyss. The crew aboard held their breath as the ship trembled under the force, but when they returned, they brought back vital data that allowed the fleet to plan safer routes. Through these trials, the people aboard the fleet began to change. They were no longer the same humans who had left known space. They had become stronger, more patient, and more inventive. Every challenge forced them to think differently, to approach problems in ways no one had taught them. And yet, despite the hardships, there was an underlying excitement. The abyss was dangerous, yes, but it was also a frontier, a blank canvas where humanity could forge a new destiny. Relationships among the fleet's inhabitants grew stronger as well. People relied on one another not just for survival, but for companionship and emotional support. Marriages, friendships, and bonds of all kinds formed under the pressure of adversity. People learned to forgive mistakes quickly, to share knowledge openly, and to value each contribution no matter how small. The isolation of space, paradoxically, brought humanity closer together. Yet not every day was filled with triumph. There were tragedies as well. Accidents occurred when ships collided with small debris traveling at immense speeds. Storms of cosmic dust damaged critical systems, forcing crews to make impossible choices about where to allocate resources. Occasionally, the loss of life hit the fleet hard, but even in grief, humanity's resilience showed. Funerals were held quietly, memories were shared, and life continued with a renewed determination. Each loss became a reminder of the preciousness of survival, of the fragility of life in a place so unforgiving. The leadership aboard the fleet constantly adapted as well. Unlike the Galactic Council, which governed through bureaucracy and politics, human leaders were judged by their ability to solve problems, to inspire hope, and to make decisions under pressure. Meetings were often long and tense, but always focused on practical solutions rather than politics. Leaders listened to suggestions from every level of the fleet, understanding that a solution from a child or a mechanic could be as valuable as one from a commander. Democracy in its most practical form, shaped by necessity rather than tradition, became the foundation of human society in the abyss. As the years passed, the fleet began to notice changes in their surroundings. The abyss was not just empty space. It was alive with phenomena that defied explanation. Clouds of dark energy shifted unpredictably. Light bent around unseen masses, and gravitational waves created subtle distortions that could affect navigation. The humans were forced to think creatively. They built instruments to measure invisible forces, experimented with propulsion systems that could adapt to the distortions, and developed algorithms to predict patterns where none seemed to exist. The abyss became not just a place of survival, but a laboratory for innovation. People also began to understand the importance of preserving culture and history. Libraries were created, both digital and physical, to record the fleet's journey and experiences. Artists documented life aboard the ships through drawings, paintings, and digital media. Musicians composed pieces inspired by the silence and darkness surrounding them. These creations served as reminders of humanity's identity and as a record for future generations. Children born during the journey experienced life entirely within the abyss. To them, the void was normal. The unknown dangers were part of their everyday reality. They learned to swim through zero-gravity corridors, to repair systems alongside adults, and to read the subtle signs of the environment that others might overlook. Their upbringing was unlike any previous generation, yet it produced humans capable of incredible adaptability and understanding. Despite all their challenges, there was a growing sense of pride among the fleet. Humanity had been exiled, cast, into the most dangerous part of the universe, yet they had survived. Not only that, they were thriving in ways that no other species had dared to attempt. Engineers had stabilized portions of the fleet against gravitational anomalies. Scientists had begun harnessing dark energy as a potential power source, and social structures had adapted to maintain order and morale. The abyss, once thought to be a place of death, was slowly becoming a place of life. The human fleet moved deeper into the darkness, encountering strange celestial phenomena that few had imagined. Comet storms lit the void like fireworks. Rogue planets drifted in eerie silence, and black holes created ripples that stretched across light years. Each encounter was a test, a lesson, and an opportunity to grow stronger. And throughout it all, humans remained united. They celebrated small victories, mourned losses together, and faced every challenge with determination. By the time the fleet had spent decades in the abyss, a transformation was clear. Humans were no longer just survivors. They were explorers, scientists, and pioneers in a place that had been deemed impossible to inhabit. They had learned to use the void to their advantage, to harness its dangers as tools rather than threats. Every obstacle became an opportunity to innovate, and every setback became a reason to persevere. The Galactic Council could not have imagined this. They had cast humanity into the abyss expecting fear, chaos, and eventual extinction. Instead, they had created a species stronger, more resourceful, and more united than ever. And as the human fleet continued its journey deeper into the unknown, the seeds of something extraordinary were being planted. Something that would one day surprise the galaxy in ways no one could predict. The journey was far from over, but life in the abyss had begun to transform from a struggle for survival into a test of creativity and ingenuity. After decades of navigating the unknown void, the human fleet had learned to adapt to conditions that no other civilization had faced. The emptiness that had once seemed oppressive now held opportunity. Every strange gravitational wave, every flicker of dark energy became a challenge to study, to understand, and to use. Humanity had begun not only to survive, but to grow in ways that were almost unimaginable. The first breakthrough came with the realization that some of the abyss's dangers could be converted into resources. Engineers had noticed that certain regions of space contained streams of energy that could be harnessed, like invisible rivers flowing through the void. It had taken years of trial and error, and many failed experiments before they developed energy collectors capable of stabilizing the chaotic streams. Once activated, these collectors powered entire sections of the fleet, reducing dependence on the ship's reactors and allowing the fleet to conserve vital fuel supplies. This discovery sparked a wave of experimentation. Scientists began testing other phenomena in the abyss. Dark matter clouds, once considered a threat because of their unpredictable gravitational effects, were now studied as potential energy sources. Rogue asteroids, previously seen only as obstacles, became testbeds for mining and resource gathering. Every corner of the void was transformed into a classroom, a laboratory, or a workshop. The abyss, once a prison, was becoming a new kind of home. With resources more secure, attention turned to settlement. Humans realized that while their ships were functional, long-term life aboard them would be exhausting and limiting. They needed a place to anchor, to build communities, and to grow. After years of scouting missions, the fleet discovered a region of the abyss where a cluster of small planets orbited a dying star. The planets were harsh and barren, but they offered something no ship could provide: solid ground. The first colony was established on the smallest planet, a rocky, gray world with a thin atmosphere. Humans arrived with cautious excitement. Landing was difficult, requiring careful navigation through turbulent gravity fields, but the crews worked together seamlessly. Engineers erected modular habitats capable of withstanding harsh winds and radiation storms. Scientists tested the soil, finding ways to extract minerals and nutrients that could support life. Slowly, buildings and structures rose, marking humanity's first permanent presence in the abyss. Life in the colony was hard, but humans approached it with determination. Children were taught from the start that survival meant understanding the environment, respecting its dangers, and using it wisely. Schools included lessons in engineering, navigation, and environmental science, alongside art, music, and storytelling. Elders shared tales of Earth and the journey through space, ensuring that the memory of home remained alive even as the new world took shape. Despite the harsh conditions, people adapted quickly. Greenhouses were built using recycled water and artificial light, producing fresh vegetables and fruits. Energy systems were linked to the dark energy collectors and gravitational generators, providing stable power. Humans learned to recycle waste efficiently, creating closed-loop systems that minimized resource loss. Every challenge was met with experimentation, trial, and careful observation. Failures were expected, but they were never discouraging. They were lessons to learn from. Social life also flourished. Humans had brought with them not just technology and knowledge, but culture, art, and curiosity. Even in the bleakness of the new world, music floated through corridors and open spaces. Communities held gatherings, celebrated achievements, and remembered those who had been lost along the journey. Games and sports were adapted to the new gravity conditions, giving children and adults a sense of play and freedom. In this way, humans preserved their humanity while adapting to a new world. Exploration continued alongside settlement. Scout teams ventured to neighboring planets, mapping resources, testing atmospheres, and cataloging potential dangers. Some planets were uninhabitable, their surfaces scorched by radiation or cracked by seismic activity. Others, though inhospitable at first glance, revealed hidden caves, underground rivers, and stable pockets of energy that could support life. Each discovery was carefully recorded, forming a growing atlas of the abyss that future generations could use. Technology advanced in ways no one had predicted. Humans began to develop spacecraft capable of navigating even the most chaotic gravitational zones, using precise calculations and adaptive engines to move through areas that would have destroyed older ships. Communication networks were improved to handle the distortions in space, allowing the fleet and colonies to maintain contact despite the unpredictable environment. Humans were no longer just surviving, they were mastering the abyss. The people themselves were changing as well. Generations born in the abyss thought of the void as home. They were stronger, more adaptable, and more resourceful than those who had left Earth. They understood the subtle signs of danger, could read shifts in gravity or energy flows instinctively, and were comfortable with uncertainty in a way that previous generations could not have imagined. The environment had shaped them, and they had, in turn, shaped it to suit their needs. Leadership evolved with these changes. Decisions were no longer made solely by a central authority. Colonies and fleet sections developed councils that included representatives from every group: engineers, scientists, teachers, and even children who showed particular skill or insight. Ideas were tested collectively, and innovation was encouraged at every level. The system was not perfect, but it worked because every person felt invested in the survival and success of the human presence in the abyss. Despite the progress, the abyss was never tame. Storms of energy erupted without warning, threatening colonies and ships. Rogue planets moved unpredictably, forcing evacuations or emergency maneuvers. Radiation bursts damaged equipment, and occasional accidents reminded everyone of how fragile life could be in this environment. Yet every threat was met with preparation and ingenuity. Humans adapted, repaired, and learned. Over time, they began to anticipate dangers before they occurred, turning the abyss into a place where survival was increasingly under their control. Humanity's reputation began to spread quietly. Messages were occasionally intercepted by alien travelers or distant civilizations. They spoke of humans living where no one else dared, of fleets moving with precision through deadly space, of colonies thriving on barren worlds. Some stories were met with disbelief, others with awe. Humans had become a species that others could not ignore, even though they remained isolated from known space. Culture and creativity remained central to life. Libraries and archives expanded with every new discovery. Art reflected the strange beauty of the abyss. Painting, sculpture, and music that captured the alien landscapes and the experience of life in darkness. Even in the harshest conditions, humans found ways to express themselves, to connect emotionally, and to celebrate existence. This was as important as technology or survival skills, because it preserved the essence of humanity in a place far removed from its origin. Over time, colonies grew and became more sophisticated. Habitats expanded, green spaces were cultivated, and small industries developed to produce essential goods. Humans began experimenting with new forms of energy, using gravitational anomalies and dark matter as fuel for propulsion and power systems. They built advanced laboratories to study the universe around them, learning more about the abyss than anyone had ever known. What had begun as exile was becoming a scientific revolution, driven by necessity and curiosity. Even the young understood the stakes. Children born in the abyss were taught not only survival skills, but also the responsibility of shaping the future. They learned to repair systems, analyze energy flows, navigate the void, and work as a community. They were raised to think critically, adapt quickly, and respect the dangers and wonders of their environment. To them, the abyss was home, and humanity's survival depended on every generation contributing to the greater mission. The fleet continued to serve as a backbone for exploration and defense. Ships moved between colonies, delivering resources, conducting research, and testing new technologies. They were not simply vessels, they were floating communities, training grounds, and lifelines. Every mission was an opportunity to push human capabilities further, to explore regions that no one else would dare, and to bring the colonies closer together. The challenges of the abyss remained immense, but humans had grown to thrive within them. Life was never easy and danger was constant, but people adapted. They had learned to respect the void, to work together, and to innovate in ways that no other species had attempted. Humanity had begun to not just exist in the abyss, but to shape it, to make it a home. And in this process, a transformation was occurring. Humanity, once young and underestimated by the Galactic Council, was evolving into a species capable of mastering what had been thought impossible. The fleet, the colonies, and the people themselves were becoming something new, stronger, smarter, and more united than ever before. They were no longer just exiles. They were pioneers, explorers, and creators, claiming the abyss not as a prison but as their own. Even in the darkness, humans laughed. Life in the abyss had begun to take shape, but humanity was still learning the limits and mysteries of this strange region. Even after decades of adaptation, the void remained unpredictable. Uncharted gravitational fields twisted space, dark energy clouds appeared without warning, and rogue celestial objects moved in ways that no navigation system could predict. For the humans, these were not just obstacles, they were lessons. Every anomaly forced them to think differently, to innovate, and to work together more closely. It was during one of these periods of intense study that the first signs of something extraordinary began to appear. While scanning a sector of the abyss previously believed empty, scientists detected faint signals. At first they thought it might be interference or sensor error. The readings were subtle, tiny fluctuations in energy that seemed almost alive, moving in patterns that were difficult to understand. The fleet's leaders decided to investigate, sending a small reconnaissance group to the source. As the ships approached, the energy patterns became clearer. They were not random. They followed rhythms, almost as if they were responding to something. Some of the crew felt a sense of unease, while others were captivated by the possibilities. Could this be a previously unknown form of life, not made of flesh and blood but of energy itself? Humans had always been explorers, and curiosity overcame fear. Engineers adjusted shields to protect the ships from potential hazards, and scientists prepared analytical instruments to capture every piece of data. The first encounter was cautious. The small fleet moved carefully, scanning and recording. The energy patterns shifted as if aware of their presence, almost like a living organism watching them. The team observed for days, learning how to move without causing disruption and how to communicate with the energy fields using subtle pulses of light and frequency. Slowly, they realized that the patterns were responding to them. It was as if the abyss itself was alive, and it was studying the humans as much as they were studying it. Back at the colonies, the discovery sparked excitement and debate. Humans had always assumed the abyss was lifeless, a place to be endured rather than inhabited. Now it seemed that life, in forms completely different from what they had known might exist. Scientists theorized, engineers speculated, and children asked endless questions about what this new form of existence might mean. The fleet began to prepare for more detailed studies, sending drones and automated probes to map the area without putting humans at risk. These encounters changed the way humans thought about their place in the abyss. They were no longer merely visitors or survivors. They were participants in a vast, complex environment that had its own rhythms, rules, and forms of intelligence. Humanity began to approach the abyss not as a hostile void to conquer, but as a world to understand and cooperate with. They refined their ship's sensors and communication systems to detect subtle signals and learn to adapt their movements to harmonize with the flows of energy and gravitational shifts around them. Exploration also revealed other, more tangible challenges. Rogue asteroids and drifting debris sometimes collided with ships, forcing emergency maneuvers. Radiation bursts from dying stars damaged equipment, requiring quick repairs under stressful conditions. One particular storm of cosmic dust forced a fleet segment to take shelter in the shadow of a small planet, where they discovered a hidden cavern filled with valuable minerals. The crisis became an opportunity. Engineers quickly set up temporary mining stations, turning danger into advantage. Life in the colonies also evolved. Humans began to expand into new areas, using advanced construction methods to build durable habitats on harsh planetary surfaces. Greenhouses grew larger, and energy systems became more efficient, incorporating lessons learned from the strange energy fields in space. Communities developed schools, research centers, and cultural hubs where art, music, and storytelling thrived. Life in the abyss was no longer just about survival. It was about creating a civilization that could flourish despite adversity. Children, born and raised entirely within the abyss, grew up with a different perspective than their ancestors. They understood the subtle cues of their environment, could navigate gravitational distortions instinctively, and had a natural curiosity about the energy patterns and anomalies around them. Their education combined practical skills such as engineering and navigation with creative thinking and problem-solving. They were taught that the abyss was not a threat to fear, but a space to understand and respect. Humans also began to experiment with new forms of propulsion and energy. The dark energy streams once considered dangerous were now studied as potential fuel sources. Adaptive engines allowed ships to move with precision through chaotic fields, and communication networks evolved to handle distortions caused by gravitational anomalies. Even the smallest colony could now maintain contact with distant fleet segments, ensuring that no part of humanity was truly isolated. These technological advances were matched by social and cultural growth. Humans continued to document their experiences, creating digital and physical archives filled with stories, scientific data, and artistic creations. Music and art reflected the strange beauty of the abyss, helping people maintain their humanity in a place far removed from Earth. Festivals and celebrations, adapted to the unique environment, gave communities a sense of identity and continuity. Life in the abyss had its hardships, but it also had joy, curiosity, and creativity. One of the most significant changes came in the way humans approached challenges. The abyss demanded teamwork, patience, and flexibility. Leaders consulted broadly, listening to engineers, scientists, and even young people with fresh ideas. Decisions were based on practical knowledge and careful observation, rather than authority or hierarchy alone. This approach created a culture of collaboration, where every voice mattered, and innovation was encouraged at all levels. As the fleet and colonies expanded, humans began to establish communication with distant parts of the abyss they had not previously explored. Scout teams traveled further, mapping gravitational anomalies, dark matter pockets, and energy streams. Each new discovery added to humanity's growing understanding of the abyss, and each successful mission reinforced the idea that they were capable of thriving in a place no other species dared to enter. Even with all this progress, the abyss reminded humans constantly of its dangers. A sudden gravitational wave could tear a ship apart in moments, and unseen energy surges could fry sensors and equipment. Radiation storms forced colonies to retreat to underground shelters. Life in the abyss demanded constant vigilance, careful planning, and the ability to adapt quickly. Humans learned to respect these dangers without fear, understanding that survival required balance, knowledge, and ingenuity. Through all these challenges, humanity's resilience became legendary within the fleet. People worked together not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Communities were strengthened by shared experiences, both joyful and tragic. Bonds formed across generations, and the collective memory of the journey through known space and into the abyss became a foundation for identity and purpose. The humans' ability to adapt and innovate did not go unnoticed. From time to time, alien travelers ventured near the edges of the abyss, reporting tales of humans thriving where no one else could. Some considered it myth, others approached cautiously, curious about this species that could survive and even flourish in the deadliest reaches of space. Humanity had become something more than survivors. They were pioneers, shaping a world that had been thought uninhabitable. As decades passed, the colonies became more self-sufficient. Advanced energy systems, efficient agriculture, and resource management allowed humans to reduce dependence on the fleet for basic survival. Engineers began designing modular habitats capable of withstanding the harshest conditions, while scientists studied local materials to improve construction. Humans learned to create life where no life had existed, transforming the abyss from a place of exile into a place of opportunity. Exploration remained a constant focus. Humans were determined not only to survive, but to understand the abyss fully. They developed tools to map energy fields, predict gravitational shifts, and detect anomalies before they became threats. They learned to move in harmony with the void, turning potential dangers into advantages. And with each new discovery, humans' confidence and skill grew. The fleet continued to serve as both protector and guide. Ships traveled between colonies, transporting resources, personnel, and knowledge. Every mission tested human ingenuity, reinforcing the lessons of adaptation, cooperation, and resilience. Even in moments of crisis, humans relied on one another, sharing skills, knowledge, and support. The abyss had taught them that survival depended not only on technology, but on unity and trust. By the time the fleet had spent decades in the abyss, humanity had transformed in profound ways. They were no longer simply exiles. They were explorers, innovators, and pioneers. The void had shaped them, and they had shaped it in return. Communities thrived on barren worlds. Technology advanced in ways no other civilization had attempted, and humans had learned to live in harmony with forces that had once seemed hostile and unknowable. Even in the deepest darkness, life flourished. Humans laughed, created, studied, and explored. Humanity had been living in the abyss for decades now, and what had once been a desperate struggle for survival had grown into something extraordinary. The colonies were thriving, the fleet was stronger than ever, and humans had learned to use the strange forces of the abyss to their advantage. Yet despite all the progress, the unknown still held surprises that reminded everyone how small they were in the vastness of space. It began with unusual readings from the outer edge of their mapped territory. The fleet's sensors detected objects moving at impossible speeds, energy signatures that did not match anything known, and gravitational distortions that seemed almost alive. The anomalies were inconsistent. One moment they appeared, the next they vanished. Some crew members were unsettled, sensing a presence in the darkness that they could not explain. Others were intrigued, their curiosity pushing them to explore further. The fleet sent a small reconnaissance group to investigate. The team consisted of experienced pilots, engineers, and scientists who had spent their lives in the abyss. Their ships were equipped with the latest adaptive engines, capable of navigating the chaotic gravitational fields that had caused countless failures in the past. They moved cautiously, scanning the area and recording every detail. The anomalies seemed to respond to their presence, shifting in patterns that suggested intelligence, though of a type that humans could not yet understand. For days, the reconnaissance team observed without approaching too closely. Slowly, patterns began to emerge. The anomalies were not random. They had structure and rhythm. They seemed to communicate or at least interact with one another in ways that suggested a complex network. Humans had never encountered anything like it. For the first time, the abyss felt less like an empty void and more like a living ecosystem, one that could challenge and teach them in equal measure. Back at the colonies, news of the findings spread quickly. Scientists debated theories, engineers suggested new tools for observation, and leaders began planning how to respond. While no immediate threat was detected, there was an underlying tension. Humanity had mastered much of the abyss, but this was uncharted territory. The humans understood that caution was essential, but their curiosity was stronger than fear. They had survived the impossible before, and now they faced an entirely new kind of challenge. The fleet began a series of controlled missions to study the anomalies more closely. Each mission revealed more details: energy formations that shifted like waves, objects that appeared to move with intent, and areas where space itself seemed distorted. Humans began experimenting with communication, sending pulses of energy and light in patterns designed to elicit responses. To their astonishment, the anomalies reacted. It was subtle at first, a flicker here, a shift there, but gradually, the humans realized that they had discovered a form of life unlike any other. The discovery transformed the human approach to the abyss. They were no longer simply exploring or surviving, they were interacting with a new and mysterious presence. Colonies adapted to accommodate research teams, and the fleet developed protocols to study the anomalies safely. Humans applied the same principles they had used for centuries on Earth: observation, experimentation, and patience. The abyss was no longer just a place of exile. It was a classroom, teaching humans about life, energy, and intelligence in ways that challenged everything they had known. This interaction with the unknown also led to advancements in technology. Engineers and scientists studied how the anomalies moved and responded, developing new propulsion systems, adaptive shields, and energy collectors that mimicked or complemented the behavior of the anomalies. Ships became faster, more efficient, and more resilient. Colonies developed energy networks that integrated principles observed in the anomalies, providing stable power in conditions that had previously been considered impossible. Humanity was not just surviving, it was evolving, learning to thrive in harmony with the forces around them. While the humans adapted, the anomalies seemed to observe and respond, though never in ways that could be fully predicted. Some missions reported subtle changes in energy patterns when humans were nearby. Others noted brief alignments in the anomalies' movements, almost as if they were testing human reactions. No attacks occurred, no deliberate harm was observed, but the sense of being watched was undeniable. Humans grew more cautious, more attentive to subtle cues, and more creative in their interactions. Over time, humans began to see the abyss not as hostile, but as a partner in exploration. The anomalies, mysterious and unpredictable as they were, offered opportunities for learning and growth. Humans developed protocols to communicate, measure, and study these entities, always respecting their unknown nature. Schools in the colonies incorporated lessons about these phenomena, teaching children to observe, hypothesize, and adapt. The young grew up understanding that intelligence and life could exist in forms very different from their own, and that respect and curiosity were essential to coexistence. As humans explored further, they began to encounter other surprises. Rogue asteroids revealed rare minerals useful for building advanced technology. Hidden energy streams offered new sources of power for the colonies and fleet. Caves beneath planetary surfaces provided natural shelter from radiation storms and allowed for the creation of more permanent settlements. Every discovery reinforced the idea that the abyss, while dangerous, was also full of potential. The humans' resilience and ingenuity had turned exile into opportunity. The colonies expanded steadily. Communities became more complex, with structures designed to withstand harsh conditions and provide comfort in the harsh environment. Greenhouses became more sophisticated, providing not only food but also spaces for learning and recreation. Social life flourished. Music, art, and storytelling kept culture alive, while festivals and communal gatherings reinforced bonds among the people. Even in the most remote parts of the abyss, humans found ways to maintain joy, creativity, and connection. The fleet continued to serve as a backbone for these communities, transporting resources, conducting research missions, and protecting the colonies. Ships moved in coordinated patterns, maintaining contact despite the chaotic nature of space. Every mission was an opportunity to learn, to test new technology, and to strengthen the bonds among humans. The fleet was more than a collection of ships. It was a living network of knowledge, skill, and purpose, linking the scattered colonies into a unified civilization. Even as humans flourished, the story of their survival began to reach beyond the abyss. Rare transmissions escaped into the wider galaxy, intercepted by distant civilizations. Accounts described a species that had survived where none else could, that had built thriving communities in the deadliest regions of space, and that had begun to interact with mysterious forces no one else could understand. Some dismissed the stories as exaggeration, others approached cautiously, curious about a species that had turned exile into mastery. Humanity's reputation was growing, even while they remained isolated. Within the colonies, leadership continued to evolve. Decisions were made collectively, with input from scientists, engineers, and citizens of all ages. Problems were solved with innovation rather than authority, and every human had a role to play in the survival and growth of their civilization. The challenges of the abyss had taught a simple but powerful lesson. Every person's contribution mattered, and cooperation was essential. Yet for all the progress, humans never lost sight of the dangers surrounding them. The abyss was unpredictable, capable of sudden storms, radiation bursts, and gravitational anomalies that could destroy a ship or a colony in moments. Safety measures, emergency protocols, and constant vigilance were part of daily life. Humans understood that mastery of the abyss required respect, not domination. They had learned to live with uncertainty, to anticipate challenges, and to adapt quickly to unexpected changes. Children born in this era were true abyssals, capable of navigating the void, understanding energy flows, and thinking creatively in ways that previous generations could not. They learned to repair systems, navigate space anomalies, and explore with caution and curiosity. Their upbringing produced humans who were not only resilient, but also deeply connected to the environment around them. They were prepared to inherit the mantle of a civilization that had not just survived exile, but had transformed it into opportunity. As decades turned into centuries, humans began to establish long-term settlements on multiple planets. They built structures that could withstand environmental extremes, developed energy systems that integrated with the anomalies, and created schools, laboratories, and cultural centers. They had turned the abyss into a living, vibrant civilization, one that was entirely their own. And then, for the first time in centuries, humanity began to consider what lay beyond the abyss. Stories of distant civilizations and old alliances reached them through rare communications, and humans realized that they were no longer isolated by weakness. They had grown stronger. They had mastered technology, understood new forms of energy, and created a civilization capable of survival in conditions no one else could endure. The thought of returning or even interacting with the wider galaxy no longer filled them with fear. It filled them with confidence. Humanity had been exiled by the Galactic Council. The abyss had changed humanity in ways no one could have imagined. What had begun as exile, as a punishment from the Galactic Council, had transformed into an era of exploration, invention, and survival. The humans who had first entered the abyss were long gone, replaced by generations born entirely within its darkness, raised to understand and thrive in an environment that had once seemed impossible. They had become explorers, engineers, scientists, and visionaries, all shaped by the void and its challenges. By now, the colonies had grown into small cities. Habitats were built from materials harvested on nearby planets and asteroids, reinforced to withstand storms of energy and gravity fluctuations. Streets and corridors hummed with activity. Greenhouses provided food, clean water, and life, giving the colonies a sense of permanence. Energy systems ran efficiently, powered by a combination of advanced reactors and the harnessed streams of dark energy discovered decades earlier. The fleet acted as both protector and guide, moving between settlements, ensuring safety, and transporting resources. The humans' understanding of the abyss had reached a level that no one else had imagined possible. They could predict shifts in gravity, navigate energy storms, and even anticipate the movements of the mysterious anomalies that had first appeared at the edge of their territory. The anomalies, once strange and terrifying, were now partially understood. Humans had learned to communicate with them in a basic way, using light pulses and energy frequencies. It was not a perfect interaction, but it was enough to create a fragile coexistence. Life in the colonies had also matured socially and culturally. People celebrated the arts, science, and storytelling. Music floated through corridors, echoing the strange beauty of the void outside. Children learned the history of Earth, the journey through known space, and the challenges of the abyss. They were taught engineering, navigation, science, and strategy, alongside art, culture, and philosophy. The human spirit, it seemed, had grown stronger than ever, finding creativity and meaning even in a place that had once been thought dead. Exploration continued relentlessly. Scout teams ventured farther into the abyss, discovering new planets, energy formations, and unusual anomalies. Each discovery was carefully studied, logged, and shared with the colonies. Humans experimented with mining, resource extraction, and energy collection in ways that turned the dangerous environment to their advantage. Every challenge strengthened them. Every risk taken became a lesson learned, and the knowledge accumulated over decades made the human civilization in the abyss more resilient with each passing year. For the first time, the fleet began to consider the wider galaxy. The humans of the abyss had survived and thrived where no other species could. They had mastered dark energy, gravity manipulation, and complex survival systems. They had learned to coexist with alien phenomena and to turn scarcity into opportunity. In many ways, they had become a new force entirely, one that even the Galactic Council might not have expected to endure, let alone prosper. Despite their growth and achievements, humans did not forget humility. The abyss was unpredictable, and its dangers were real. Storms could destroy equipment in seconds, energy surges could disable entire settlements, and rare gravitational anomalies could tear ships apart if approached carelessly. The humans respected these threats, preparing for them, learning from them, and adapting strategies to minimize risk. They had learned that survival required not just skill and innovation, but awareness, patience, and collaboration. Communication between colonies became seamless. Advanced networks allowed real-time coordination across vast distances. Engineers in one settlement could assist with repairs in another. Scientists could monitor experiments remotely, and fleets could redirect resources in response to sudden environmental changes. The human civilization in the abyss had evolved into a coordinated, intelligent system with each colony, ship, and individual contributing to a larger purpose. The children of the abyss were particularly remarkable. They were born into a world that demanded ingenuity and resilience. They learned to move through low-gravity corridors with ease, understand energy flows instinctively, and analyze complex data at a young age. Their education focused not just on survival but on innovation. They were taught to think creatively, solve problems quickly, and imagine solutions no one else had considered. They were not just the next generation, they were the architects of a civilization that had redefined life in the void. Humanity's reputation quietly spread beyond the abyss. Intercepted transmissions described a species that had conquered exile, building thriving cities where no other civilization dared. These stories were met with awe, skepticism, and cautious curiosity by distant civilizations. Some considered it myth. Others approached with interest, curious about how humans could survive and flourish in a place previously considered uninhabitable. The humans in the abyss had become pioneers whose skills and resilience challenged the expectations of the galaxy. Innovation continued at an unprecedented pace. Ships were designed to adapt instantly to environmental changes, utilizing gravitational currents and dark energy streams to navigate faster and more efficiently. Colonies developed energy grids that could stabilize local anomalies, allowing for more predictable living conditions. Humans studied the mysterious energy formations, learning to extract power safely and even using them to develop new technologies that could one day extend life, increase efficiency, or enable travel beyond the abyss. The anomalies themselves had become allies of sorts. Through careful observation and experimentation, humans had learned to predict their behavior and even communicate in limited ways. It was clear that these entities were neither hostile nor fully understood, but coexistence was possible. Humans approached the anomalies with respect and caution, understanding that cooperation was more valuable than domination. It was a relationship built on curiosity, intelligence, and patience. Social structures within the colonies were equally advanced. Decisions were made collectively, with input from engineers, scientists, educators, and even young adults who demonstrated exceptional insight. Leaders were respected not for authority alone, but for wisdom, problem-solving skills, and the ability to inspire trust. Communities thrived because each person's contribution mattered, and innovation was encouraged at every level. The lessons learned in the abyss had created a civilization where collaboration, creativity, and resilience were more important than power or hierarchy. Cultural achievements flourished alongside technological and scientific progress. Music, art, and literature reflected the strange beauty of the abyss, giving humans a sense of identity and continuity, even in the most remote parts of the void. Celebrations, festivals, and communal events reinforced bonds between individuals and colonies. Humans had created not just survival systems, but a thriving civilization rich in culture, knowledge, and shared purpose. As centuries passed, the human presence in the abyss became legendary. Colonies dotted planets and moons. Energy networks spanned the region, and fleets moved with precision and coordination that had no parallel elsewhere. Humans had turned exile into mastery, shaping the environment to support life, innovation, and culture. The fleet had become a symbol of human resilience, moving between colonies, studying anomalies, and exploring new territories with confidence and skill. The Galactic Council, which had once exiled humanity with the expectation of their extinction, had long lost contact. Yet, even if they had observed, they would have been astonished. Humanity had not only survived, they had evolved. They had turned a place of punishment into a home, mastered unknown forces, and created a civilization capable of thriving under conditions no one else had dared to face. The abyss, once feared and avoided, had become proof of human ingenuity and determination. Humans continued to explore the outer reaches of the abyss, mapping new planets, energy streams, and anomalies. Each mission brought new discoveries, some of which challenged understanding of physics, life, and energy. Humans adapted quickly, developing technologies and strategies to turn potential dangers into opportunities. They had learned to anticipate challenges, work together under pressure, and innovate in ways that no other civilization had attempted. The society in the abyss remained vibrant, united by a shared history of exile, survival, and achievement. Communities thrived because every person understood their role in the greater mission. Knowledge was shared openly, experiments were conducted collectively, and art and culture provided a human touch in the vast, alien environment. Life was not just possible, it was extraordinary. The humans of the abyss had discovered something profound, that adversity could be a teacher, that exile could be transformed into opportunity, and that life could flourish even in the harshest, most unforgiving conditions. They had become masters of their environment, pioneers in a place no one else had dared to enter, and creators of a civilization that was entirely their own. And so, the abyss, once meant to break humanity, had instead forged them into something greater. Ships moved through dark energy streams with precision, colonies glowed with life on barren worlds, and children played and learned in environments that challenged both mind and body. Humans had transformed every obstacle into an opportunity, every mystery into a lesson, and every